Everyone, welcome to the show. I wanted to talk today about peace. I know it sounds kind of cheesy, but just to be, 100% honest with you guys, I'm kind of going through something right now that is troubling, and I'm just the same as you. I run into things that are that you try to make sense of, or you're trying to get through, or you're trying to just deal with life in general while you're dealing with this thing that's going on in your life. And it varies. It varies from losing your job and trying to find a new job, or you are dealing with a loss of some sort, a death of a person, a relationship that's dying. It's a lot of things like that just with loss. And in today's day and age, we have kind of grown cold. We get into our own worlds, and we forget about what's going on around us a lot of times and what's going on with people. I think one of my favorite illustrations was a pastor giving a story, and this when I was a kid, and he was talking about this gentleman who was in a convenience store, and his kids are going crazy, and it doesn't seem like he is paying attention or being a good dad, or whatever people may assume. The kids are kind of going crazy. And finally, somebody gets fed up with it and says, "Hey, sir, you really need to watch your kids." And he looked up, and as like he was coming from a daze, and he said, I'm sorry, I buried my wife today. And so a lot of times from the outside looking in, we let our assumptions go crazy about what people should be doing, their expectations. We a lot of times pretend to assume that we just are so observant to know what's going on in somebody's life, and a lot of times we are pretty judgmental about it as well. Now, there is a disclaimer with that. I will say, though we go through hard times, that doesn't give us a free pass when we're the person that's going through the hard time, just to say whatever we feel and treat other people and then just blame it, well, I was going through a hard time. We still have to apply Jesus's grace to others, even though we need that grace right now. And so just remember that sometimes taking a beat and not going crazy on somebody or assuming about that person what you think is going on, or even still, like my wife used to do this at one point in our marriage because of this romanticized idea that she could complete my sentences to where I couldn't get my whole sentence out because they were completing it for me. You need to give that person space to talk. A lot of times it's not what we say that matters. It's how we listen that matters. I wrestle with this, especially as a male. Men tend to be fixers. Men tend to try to find a solution to everything, and that's just not the way it is. There are things that there is no solution to. There's no way to fix it. It's how we're there for the other person. And also, whenever you're going through big things, a lot of times you get too many individuals with individual personalities and individual feelings, individual reactions into one area, and then it causes more trouble than not. So sometimes space is an important thing. We have to remember that people have different difficulties in their lives, different obstacles. Not everybody can drop something, and expectation is a killer. A lot of times people assume, hey, I can just drop everything and come deal with that. Well, no, we have jobs and kids and responsibilities, and it doesn't always line up. But because you're not there doesn't mean you can't be there in the most important way, which is prayer. prayer is the biggest and most important piece of the puzzle. And the reason why I say that is because um, there's peace that comes with that. And that's really what I wanted to talk about today is whenever you really have God in your life, I know that people need that sense of presence in some situations, and sometimes people are just simply not able to be there. So it's the responsibility that we have as Christians to be there for them in prayer, praying for them, petitioning God on their behalf for comfort and for His will to be done, not our own ambitions, not our own thinking of what God should do. I can speak on this somewhat because I'm a reserved person. I try not to let my anger or my internal feelings get too far ahead of me. I try to be very considerate. And the problem with that is sometimes people misinterpret that as that you don't care or you're not present with the situation or you don't understand completely what's going on with whatever. And that's not the truth. There are some people that are just more thought-provoking and trying to do things in what is in their means. And as I've gotten older, I've realized that slowing down the response keeps me in check. But one of the things that I lean on and things that give me great comfort is a passage that's in Philippians. It's Philippians 4, 6 through 7. And it says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God will transcend all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ." And so ultimately, this tells us something about what we think we can do. In my time on this planet, I've realized there is very few things I have control over. And so I tend to lean a whole lot more on God, who has control of everything. And I don't always want it to be for my selfish wants. I mostly want to understand. And with that lack of control and leaning on God, who has control of everything, and putting my trust in Him that it will work out for the greater good, that's where I have to put my thoughts and my prayers. There's so many things that we don't know. And there's a song, it's by Garth Brooks. It was released in the late 80s, I believe. But it's called "Thank God for Unanswered Prayers." And really it's about just that, about all the prayers that God did not answer that were actually not in our best interest. And how, because of God's great knowledge, everything turned out as it should. Whether it be, I wanted it to work out with that one person, that one person that was going to complete me, and it turns out it really wasn't a good fit. And that would have gotten in the way of you finding the actual person that completes you and makes your relationships work. Those are the things that we forget about. A lot of times we get sucked into our own wants, not our needs, but our wants. And most importantly, when those wants, we want them just for ourselves, selfishly. And when it's regarding to another person, it very well may not be what is going to be good for that person. And it's tough. Especially when it comes to death. Death is a hard one because we don't want people to die. We want them to live forever, and that's just not possible. And we don't get a chance to control how it comes about either. And we just have to trust in God. We have to trust. And in fact, this is kind of off the cuff, but when we read about Jesus and Lazarus dying, Mary and Martha were a little sour about this. This was their brother, and they knew Jesus could save him. And he didn't make it there before Lazarus died. And actually, I really needed to hear this because I just heard this the other day, and it just dawned on me as I'm talking about this. Um, and it added some comfort because Jesus does things in his own time. Now, in this story, Jesus resurrected Lazarus from the dead to show his glory. But in most situations, that's not the case. We have to remember when it comes to death, we live a fleeting life. As soon as we're born, we're moving towards death. And then we're moving towards a transition to be with the Father or to be away from the Father. There's just two options there. And we have some control in that by our choices, but our lives don't always turn out the way we want them to. Sometimes it turns out for the very best scenario that will keep our soul intact. Like, for instance, maybe you have an addiction towards money and you just don't realize it. So then you start going into college, into all of these different routes, and you start making a whole lot of money. And because you're predisposed to be addicted to that, you lose God in the process. You don't even realize it. You're just trying to live a good life. You're trying to make as much money as you can. But you don't realize that in going for this thing of the world, you are losing God, who is of spirit. Where what God may do, in this case, knowing this beforehand, He may give you a want to work with your hands. And maybe it's not a very beneficial money-wise style of living that you're making. Maybe there's a lot of struggle, but there's a spirituality about it that keeps you close to God, and that struggle keeps you dependent on God and not going after all of the materials of the world. That's not saying that God doesn't want us to be fruitful in life. I'm just saying that God may steer us away from things that could cause us to go down a bad path. Much in the same way that our parents would try to guide us down things that might keep us from going down a bad path. Maybe not giving you a cell phone right when you want one. Maybe waiting till you're old enough to understand the responsibility of having a cell phone. These are things that we just have to look at. And we also have to say that we're going to rest in Jesus' peace. In fact, Jesus directly said this in Matthew, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." Well, how does that relate to peace? Well, I guess, it's in the name, but peacemakers are people that try to keep the peace. And sometimes you don't always understand what they're doing or why they're doing it, but God has given them a gift to keep peace. Sometimes keeping the peace is being silent, especially when there's a whole lot of chaos going around. And if you were just to add one more opinion to it, it just makes it more chaotic, rather than being that lightning rod in the middle that grounds everybody else. Trying to find the good in things, trying to find God's will in things. These are what peacemakers do. They try to walk a better path. And we forget about that a lot of times. Sometimes we think people who don't do anything are weak. But I assure you, like I teach my kids, sometimes doing nothing is the best thing, because everything else would have repercussions that are worse than the act itself. One of my students is in high school. He had a kid just come up and slap him across the face. I am so proud of him because he didn't do anything. He did do something. He kind of laughed it off a little bit, but this kid immediately turned his back and walked away after the slap. It's kind of like a Will Smith, Chris Rock kind of thing. Now, here's the deal, though. If he had pursued and started a fight, because that child turned their back, that would have been assault. He would have effectively taken all the eyes off of him and put all the eyes on what he did, instead of his strength to stay still, he would have been an aggressor and he would have been a bad guy. Jesus doesn't call us to go around beating people up because they don't think the same way that we do. Jesus doesn't call us to go around and have this eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth mentality. In fact, Jesus says if they slap you on your cheek, turn your head and give them the other. He calls us to be peacemakers. He calls us to not fight violence with violence. He calls us not to fight harsh words with harsh words. And we all could do better with that. Trust me. In today's society, what I see online, how I see people treat people about politics and all that, it's always, I'm right, you're wrong. You have no validity in your thinking because it doesn't align with mine. And see, we lose the ability to find the middle ground. Because usually a person is not all wrong or all right. They're somewhere in the middle in most situations and opinions. Jesus also gives us this promise. He says, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives. I do not let your hearts be troubled and do not let your hearts be troubled and do not be afraid." What's Jesus saying here? He's saying, believe in me, follow my guidance, follow my laws, and there is going to be a different kind of peace. Peace doesn't mean that you don't have trouble in your life and hardships. Peace means that Jesus is sitting with you, silently with you, silently putting his arm on your shoulder, silently listening. Jesus doesn't expect us to be perfect. Jesus, if we have petitions and anger, it's okay to express that. A real relationship is a two-way street. I think we need to remember that. We've forgotten a lot of that. And we need to come back to that. Christians, don't play into the world's games. You're going to be tested. Jesus said that the world will hate you for believing in him. But remember, they hated him first. Jesus died for us. Jesus didn't stop speaking about the glory of God and the righteousness and the unrighteousness that he was seeing. And he was killed for it. But these are things that must come to have the one sacrifice for sin of all time. In Isaiah prophesied Christ's coming, but he said he will end the daily sacrifice because he became the sacrifice. And Isaiah doesn't say that piece of it, but that's what Jesus came to do, is become the sacrifice so we may have grace. We may, through faith in him, have grace and enter heaven. And through him, because of him, be peacemakers. Be people that are of good fruit. Be people that are strong in silence or strong in poignant speaking, not getting down into the nastiness that people get into, but just saying solid truths. Let's lean into that. Let's try to be that for Christ. If you all have not found Christ, if you all are questioning things, get into the Bible. Read it for yourself. I see so often that people just listen to what their pastor says, or they just listen to what a friend says, or what a YouTube channel says. And those people are usually the ones that are swaying so much in the wind. They don't have firm rooted, they're not like a tree. They're not like the mighty oak. They're more like a swaying leaf or a leaf blowing in the wind. If you don't have your roots in Bible reading, start. That's where the truth's at. That's where Jesus comes and meets with you. Church is great for fellowship and for extended learning, but church isn't the end-all be-all. The Bible is the end-all be-all. That's where we go to get our truth. I've seen countless preachers twist the word. Online, in person, you name it, I've seen it. We need to put our faith in the Bible, read the Bible, interpret it for ourselves, and don't take it for granted. I love you all, and I hope you have a blessed week. Sorry I'm a little short this week, and that might be great for some, and some may not like it. There's just a lot's going on. So I hope you have a great week, and I hope that God blesses you.